Hello, welcome to this grad panel we're hosting, GBIC and UBIC together. We've invited 4 lovely panelists today who are all Bioinformatics PhD students here at UCSD. If you'd all like to introduce yourselves, Alex Tran, would you like to start?
Yeah, well, I don't go to UCSD, I go to UIUC, but I was the UBIC president 2 years ago, and he also has me back, so I give a little bit outside of the role. I'm a Bioinformatics PhD student here, and I'm a second year, so I haven't quite gotten into the weeds of it, but am I supposed to use my research too?
Sure, yeah, you can talk a little bit about it.
Okay, yeah, so I work with bioinformatics, and specifically I work with corn, so great reason to the Midwest. But I work with gene regulatory networks and trying to put together inference networks to be able to predict gene regulation changes from transcription factors and how that affects the metabolism downstream.
Cool, yeah, super interesting. Yeah, Joe, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. So hi, I'm Joe. I'm a PhD student at UC San Diego in bioinformatics. I'm in my 4th year. So hopefully the end is like kind of in sight. But I'm in the lab of Professor Emma Farley, and we basically are really interested in getting at how genotype, how like mutations to the genome cause disease. And so we do a lot of high throughput experimentation in model organisms, such as the sea squirt, to try to understand how like gene regulatory elements in the genome, how their function is encoded in DNA sequence. And then we use the rules we learned there to try to understand which mutations in humans cause disease.
All right. Well, Andrea, would you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Andrea. I'm a 5th year bioinformatics PhD student here at UCSD. For undergrad, I did microbiology, immunology, and molecular genetics, so a little bit of a transition. I'm in Dr. Hannah Carter's lab, and we study the MHC, or at least I do, and I have a really quick slide, I guess, if that's helpful. I don't know who the host is.
Yeah, can you screen share or should I enable that?
I can't. Can you enable, please?
Yeah. Great, yeah, can you share now?
Okay, can you see that? So it's kind of a lot, but the MHC is a protein complex on all of our cells that presents intracellular peptides to the immune system. And so that's one way that your body can detect cancer. And so we study, I study that protein complex, and we found, a bunch of different things, what happens when it's mutated, how differential strength of your immune system can affect tumor development and response to immunotherapy, and also new ways for predicting kind of relevance for peptide immunogenicity. So this is a lot. We can talk about it if you want, but just wanted to throw that up there.
Well, yeah, Mike, finally, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Cuoco. I'm a PhD student in bioinformatics at UCSD in the same program as Joe, Andrea, and Alex here. I guess, yeah, I went to college and I studied biology, cellular and molecular biology, and I minored in computer science and math. So that's kind of my background coming to the program. I probably wasn't as computer savvy as you bioinformatics undergrads are at your stage, but I'm here and I'm alive. And I ended up joining two labs for my PhD. I am co-advised by Professor Rusty Gage at the Salk Institute and Professor Aran Mukamel in the Cognitive Sciences Department here at UCSD. And I work on studying transposable elements in the developing brain, the healthy adult brain, and the diseased brain. These are jumping genes that are actually first discovered in corn. And Alex might have heard about them. Alex Tran might have heard about them. And that discovery won the Nobel Prize. And it turns out they're not just in corn, but they're also in humans. And they're on in humans. And they're jumping around in our genomes. So I'm actually trying to figure out what's going on there.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I love the corn connection. Yeah. Well, I guess for our first question,
well, I think Alex Wenzel is also on the call. I'm not sure if you introduced yourself yet.
Yes. I just yeah, Alex, would you like to introduce yourself also?
Sure. Hi, I'm Alex. I'm also a fifth year in the Bioinformatics and Systems Biology program. I did my undergraduate in computer science, and now I've been moving more towards the biology, bioinformatics direction. My work studies transcriptional changes in cancer. Specifically, we work on a family of algorithms, sort of generally known as gene set enrichment analysis. And my thesis focuses on enhancing that particular type of statistical analysis, bringing it to new technologies like single cell analysis and work along those lines.
Yeah. Okay, and now maybe we can start with our first question. So I guess for starters, Mike, if you want to take this one, we can all kind of go in order. What drove you to pursue a PhD in bioinformatics?
Yeah, so like I said, I majored in biology in my undergrad, and I was really gung-ho on biology since elementary school, really. I was obsessed with it, and I have been ever since. And I also, I was good at computers. I was one of those kids in class that was, I enjoyed learning the newest tricks and shortcuts and ways to make my work faster and more efficient. And so I picked up a programming class in college, but I really wanted to do medical school throughout college, and I'm sure many of you might be considering that as well. But it wasn't until I really worked in biomedical research full time, really dived into research projects and thought deeply about these problems, did I fall in love with research and realize that I wanted to become a scientist. And that's what made me choose the PhD direction. And then the reason I chose bioinformatics was because, I kind of realized that in biology, our cells follow a certain set of rules that are dictated by all the molecules in our DNA and that are produced in our cells, in the nucleus and all the proteins and metabolites that are produced. And those molecules can be modeled computationally. And it turns out a lot of things can be, like, we can use computer science to figure out a lot about biology, is I guess the way what I'm trying to say. Maybe not so eloquently, but anyway, that's why I did bioinformatics. I really appreciated the connection to computer science and the application specifically between computer science and biology. But that's my story.
Cool. Yeah, Alex Tran, would you like to share?
Yeah, so I originally in looking to do bioengineering. That was the major I chose at UCSD, and I'm sure students here are only just now really learning what bioinformatics is. So it was sort of a thing that I fell in love with as I got to learn it. And why I chose to do a PhD is more to do with why over industry, and I don't know if that's a question y'all will ask us later. But I really like the people, and I started in modeling and computational chemistry and then moved to the plant sphere. After I got into plant research, it became a space that I really liked. The way that people think and innovate with computational technologies felt like a really exciting time to be in bioinformatics compared to, like, say, medical research, for me at least. It's also cool, but plant biology was where I felt like I could grow the most. And it's sort of a field where having a PhD is something that really starts your career, more so than I would say medical bioinformatics, where you could get an industry job. Yes. Yeah, but that's my answer. We can get more into it with the next questions.
Cool. Yeah, Joe, what do you like to talk about?
Yeah, so I guess like I started out in molecular biology in UC Santa Cruz. I did bio. I guess yeah, I did bio because like my parents were in research and they did bio, and I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Business like scared me because like I don't know, sales it just seems like, I don't know, I feel like I would just fail at it. And so I just wanted to do something where there was a correct answer, and that seemed to be science. And then I did like, an undergrad research thing in chemistry. And I thought that was fun, but I wanted to be closer to biology. And then after I graduated, I got a job as an intern at this biotech startup where I was doing like molecular biology, cloning, a lot of stuff like that. And eventually we got around to having some high throughput sequencing experiments going on. And I was what they called the resident millennial. So I like just kind of learned how to code like pipelines on Bash. And I kind of got RNA-seq and different like a chip experiment, chip pipeline going. And a lot of the other like startups that we were kind of in contact with, it was kind of obvious that there was always this need for bioinformatics and like high throughput screening. So that got me really interested in that. And I knew that if I wanted to kind of be like a project leader, like not just someone who is like doing the actual research or, just coding pipelines basically, you'd have to have like a PhD. And so I decided to apply to PhD programs in bioinformatics. And so that's how I landed here.
Or Andrea, would you like to share?
Sure. So I guess up until I started the PhD, I wasn't sure that I wanted to do a PhD. And I suppose during the PhD, I was like, do I really want to do this? And I guess my reasons for that were it's such a long time. By the end of it, I'm going to be, 5 or 6 years older, whatever. But as I'm going through it and as I'm almost finished with it, I think there truly is no rush to get into the workforce because you're going to be doing that forever. And it really has been an enjoyable experience. So I mentioned that my undergrad was microbiology. Part of that, we had to either do lab courses, which was like wet lab courses, or we could do independent research. And so kind of by chance, I joined a bioinformatics lab, was starting to get exposed, decided to do the bioinformatics minor. And at the same time, I saw all the wet lab people going through really long protocols and not having a great time. And whereas my own research was able to progress very quickly thanks to, computer science, and if you don't have results, you move on to the next thing quickly. And I really like the fast-pacedness, as well as the particular field that I'm in is also really hot right now. So I think that's also very exciting to me to be working on something. And I guess like Mike and many of you, I was pre-med in undergrad, and I knew that I wanted to have an impact on patients. And I guess I wasn't aware up until like third year when I talked to some research clinicians that you don't really have a one-on-one kind of impact on patients as far as a research perspective. And so the idea of doing PhD level research and having findings that could impact potentially more people than I would treat was really appealing to me. So here we are.
Well, yeah, Alex Wenzel, would you like to share?
Sure. I would say that I started doing research in computer science in my sophomore year, and I started doing research in a computational biology lab in my junior year. And I think it was up until that point that I knew I enjoyed software engineering and I guess what I now call data science, though I didn't really have that term in my head back then, but I wasn't really sure what I was passionate about applying it to. And discovering bioinformatics sort of gave me that something that I had skills to match something that I really enjoyed doing and enjoyed working on. And I was really, strongly encouraged by the mentors that I had at the time to pursue a PhD. And I think it was definitely the right choice because I really enjoy the sort of the collaborative, open sort of nature of academia. I'm a big fan of open source anything, and if someone told me, the code you're writing is proprietary, you don't want to show that to anyone, I'd be sad. So it just felt like that it was really the right place to be. It was the place I could contribute the most using sort of the skill set that I had developed as a computer science major. I also really enjoyed like the learning aspect, and when you're in a field that's as multidisciplinary as ours is, where we in a cancer side, we really need the data scientists and the oncologists and the basic biologists and the doctors and the clinic staff who actually work with the patients and know really what they need. There's always something to learn, and there's always everyone in the room has a unique perspective towards solving it's a really complicated problem, and I find that very rewarding.
Well, yeah, great answers. I guess to kind of a more advice kind of direction question, how did you all choose your current programs, and like what are the most important factors you looked at? So geographical location, fundings, rotations, private and public. Are there any kind of that surprised you that you wish you looked more into before you chose? Yeah, we don't like to share. Like Alex Tran, would you like to share?
Yeah, I'm going to shut the video. Audio is bad, so I'll give. But yeah, I chose my program for a couple of reasons. The main one is that my advisor is a dream, the best advisor you have, and he went through a lot of effort to make sure that she knew my goals, they fit into hers, way before I had chosen to enter this program, her lab, and that was very important to me. And another was just the quality of life I would have for the next 5 years. I got a very similar stipend to this school I would have UCSD, and that money goes a lot further here. And a PhD is a marathon, not a sprint. And I wanted to pick something where I'd be living a very consistent way and not burn out. And so this made a lot more sense to me than sticking to UCSD. That, and I also just wanted to grow my network, and having of UBIC, I felt like I had met a lot of the group at CSD, and so this was just the next step for me. But I'd be happy to come back.
Oh yeah, Joe, would you like to share?
Sure. I applied to like, I think 4 or 5 PhD programs. I'm a bit of a snob, so I only applied to West Coast and East Coast schools. I've like only lived on a coast and my whole life, so I was like afraid of going inland. So I only got into 2 schools. I just kind of like applied to, I knew like, I had like attended some seminars and like, I like talked to like different people who were doing bioinformatics and kind of in the field that I wanted to. And I asked them like what schools had really good, programs that were good. And so I applied to like a handful of them. And then I got into like UCSD and Columbia and NYU. And I figured if I was going to go to New York, I'd go to Columbia. So it was basically between going to San Diego or New York. And I decided San Diego because the weather is like amazing, and you can like have access to the outdoors. I mean, you guys all know what San Diego is like. For me, I don't really, I don't care about like, I feel like if you get a PhD in bioinformatics and you're looking for jobs or postdocs, the thing that they're going to weight the most is going to be what your project was, what your publications were, and how that relates to the position and project you're applying for. It doesn't really, I don't think that they're going to care as much if you got a PhD program from like X school versus Y school. I mean, it certainly helps to go to Harvard, I'm sure, but like in the end, your work is going to speak for itself. And also like if you get along with the people you work with, you'll have very good letters of recommendation. So I just more weighted where I wanted to go to school rather than the particular university.
All right, yeah, Andrea, would you like to share?
So let me see. So I was in a bunch of programs in undergrad that kind of helped pave the way towards applying to the PhD and getting prepped and everything. So that was really helpful. And I ended up applying to, I want to say like 8 programs. And I didn't look at the faculty until I got interviews, which is probably not a good idea. Definitely look at the faculty and who you'd want to work with ahead of time and make that be the deciding factor. Because I ended up doing all these interviews, and then at the end, I was like, wait, this school doesn't even have anyone that I'd want to work with. And so I ended up choosing UCSD because as part of those undergrad programs, or actually I came to UCSD STARS during the summer of 2016, where I spent 10 weeks in Hannah Carter's lab, which was really representative of what graduate school was like. So I would highly recommend doing something like that. I got exposed to a great mentor, great lab. And so I decided to come here for that. And also I had a postdoc mentor at UCLA that was helping me choose between the programs. And he was like, if you have the choice, be near your family. And so I was like, I don't know. I mean, I left San Diego to be independent or whatever, but it has been really great having my parents close by, just having support. If I'm feeling like overwhelmed, I can go home. So that's been really great. And I think that's everything. But maybe more will come up.
Yeah, Mike. Want to share?
So I definitely want to echo obviously agree with everything that everybody else said so far. I think the place you apply really depends on the stage you're at as a scientist and what you want out of grad school. Like Joe said, if you publish well and work on the right projects, you can get a position in an industry very easily with a PhD, no matter where you go to school. And kind of along the lines of what Alex said, I think, and I completely agree that your advisor is probably the most important person in your graduate career. And oftentimes, just like Alex did, people will choose the school based off of a single faculty member that's present at the institution. So, but it's hard to do the research because there's so many faculty out there, and the web pages aren't always up to date. I was similar to Andrea, where I got these interviews, and I got these 3 names of people that I was going to talk to when I visited the school, and I had to read about them, and then I realized how much I didn't know about the long list of faculty at this institution. So it's very difficult. But I think the best bet, and why I chose UC, I was deciding between UCSD, Duke, and UChicago for my, what I narrowed them down to in the end. The reason I chose UCSD is because, after doing all that reading of all the different faculty at these 3 institutions, I decided that UCSD, there were the most faculty at UCSD that I would potentially like to work with. UCSD seemed to be a place that a lot of exciting science was happening. There were people from different fields that were really good at what they were doing, and that I could somehow work with those people if I wanted to. Whereas Duke and Chicago were both great institutions, but they're both a little bit smaller, and Chicago specifically is very small, the program that I applied to there. So I felt like, I felt a little boxed in, and I wasn't totally confident with any of the faculty in that program. So that's kind of my decision-making process. It really comes down to the faculty, I think. That person is going to really dictate and set you off in your career in science. So you want to find someone who's really, you're going to mesh well with and grow the most with.
Cool, yeah, finally, Alex Wenzel, would you like to share?
Sure. I ended up choosing between the program at Northwestern, where I went to undergrad, and UCSD, and definitely one of the factors there was I grew up in the area around Chicago, and I definitely wanted to kind of go do something new and go to a new place. And also, I think the breadth of UCSD's program was something that was attractive to me, because I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to study. A lot of people sort of some almost have even like a thesis already in mind when they're looking at grad school, but I wasn't one of those people. So I like the idea of having a really broad base of faculty to sort of explore what their labs were and explore what their research was, and find a place where I could contribute. So that was what sort of really kind of informed my decision.
Just to add on, really, we talked a lot about like what kind, like looking at professors, and I think I definitely agree. Like I was in a similar place to Alex. Like I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, and so like I think you should use all the information in front of you to choose like the right PI, or to figure out what faculty would be most likely to be most aligned with your interest. But another really important aspect of your PI is like how nice they are and like how they mentor their students, and if they're hands-on or they're hands-off. Those are also really important things that you will not know until you've rotated with them, and then you'll only have a taste of it. You won't really know what your PI is like until you're like a year into your PhD, I think. But I think like no matter what, you should use all the information you can, but in the end, like you'll be fine, and like not to worry too much about it. If you're like, it's definitely not something you need to like stress heavily over.
I think I would also like to add to that, oh, sorry, Andrea.
And I go ahead.
That, you know, it's just like Joe and others have said that like the PI is extremely important. You will notice, or I've at least noticed that, you know, different institutions will have different philosophies and cultures around how they approach training, and also they'll have different like expertise. You know, so one institution might have a group of faculty that is really good at one thing. In a different place might have a group of faculty that's really good at something else. So I think identifying those cultural differences and like philosophical differences in the way that, you know, groups of faculty approach training students, and how groups of faculty are, you know, good or not so good at certain pieces of their science is really important, I think, when choosing a school. It's very hard to do, but I think just talking to people that have been in those places is the best way to do it.
I would just like to add that the grad students and the people in the lab can give you, usually give you an honest assessment of their PI and their the PIs, you know, how they work and how they manage you. Because I mean, I say Hannah's great, but if you need, you know, micromanaging, then I wouldn't pick Hannah, for example. So talking to people, reaching out through email, usually they'll answer and be happy to have a Zoom or something.
Yeah, thank you for that. Someone asked, how do they strengthen their profile if they're a junior and just realized they want to go for a PhD? Yeah, Alex Tran or Joe, you like to start off?
I was just, could you repeat the question? Sorry, I just.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Or maybe if you
Someone
didn't.
asks, yeah, if they're a junior and they just realize they want to go to a PhD, how do they strengthen their profile to be a competitive candidate?
Could you put the question in the chat, or if could someone else like repeat? Yeah, sorry, I just couldn't.
Yeah,
I couldn't
yeah,
hear
I'll
it.
post it.
How to be competitive as a junior who just decided they want to do a PhD, basically the question.
Oh, you're a junior and you want to be competitive for a PhD program.
Yeah, the junior in college.
Okay.
Third year. I would say just do research. That's my short and sweet answer. I think just get involved in research and you know, work hard and have something to show for it. I think is the, yeah.
Oh yeah, I would echo that. I would really recommend doing a summer REU. REU stands for, I don't remember actually, but it's like if you Google that plus NIH, you'll get to like a database for basically all the universities in the United States and maybe abroad. And you can search by, I think, like field or whatever. And so you can basically go anywhere, get paid a couple $1,000s, usually get housing, and do full-time research for a little bit. Yes, awesome. And that will, one, get you a really good letter of rec, and two, you won't be, you know, having to focus on, hopefully not, your classes, and that'll help you really get something out of the project that you're doing. And so that would be the biggest thing. Do research. You do need three letters of recommendation. Obviously, you probably can't get three that are like super, super great, but if you can get just one from, for example, a summer program that's really solid, that will help so much. Because when I was at UCLA, my PI at the time was the program director, and he told me that he was really almost blown away by the letter that Hannah wrote me. So I'm sure that's what helped me get so many interviews when, you know, I didn't have any publications or anything, or I wasn't on a paper like some other people were. So that really, really helps.
panelists have anything else to add, or does that kind of cover it?
Yeah, I would say like you don't need a paper, but like it's super good to have one. And like definitely if I think like the RUs are great. And then also like I think it looks really good to have like a longer term like research project too. Like if there are any faculty, like just reaching out to faculty who you might be interested in working for. Usually professors will take, especially at UCSD. Santa Cruz is a little harder to find, but I feel like I hear about undergrad research interns all the time. And I think if your undergrad is bioinformatics and you want to do bioinformatics in grad school, like you're already a very competitive applicant, because I think like all the coursework is there, and like, yeah, you just need to get that research.
I would like to add that I think doing postgraduate work, it delays your PhD, and PhD, like Andrea said, PhD can be a long time, and you're however many years old. So we won't say ages, but by the end. But I personally took 4 years off after college, and I grew in leaps and bounds in those 4 years. And I'm so happy that I did that, because I entered my PhD and I had a really clear vision of what I wanted to do and how to approach certain problems. And it was much easier for me to like get going on research. And like I also got like a good amount of publications during those 4 years that really bolstered my application. And like that experience was, helped me grow as a researcher, like I said. So you don't have to do 4 years, but I think doing some time off and working full time at a company or in a lab as a technician or like some kind of computational biologist can go a long way.
And just one side note off what Mike said, like I think it's also really important to know that research is something you want to do for 5 years, because the PhD is like, you should all be super excited about the notion of doing a PhD, but it can be really hard sometimes, and it really requires you to love research and love taking classes, at least for the first 2 years. So like having that confidence that like research is what you want to do, it will make the whole thing a lot easier as well.
Yeah, so like doing a little test run post-grad, being a technician for a year or two, you can kind of get a feel for it. Then you can ask yourself, is this right, or do I hate this? And then move forward from there.
You're really committed to applying right away. It's also helpful to show in your personal statements that you've really made research is like against your experiences, and be intentional in describing how you think you'll be successful at doing research for the next 5 years. Say, like, you did this X thing at an internship, and that really spoke to you. And so that's why a PhD is worth it.
Yeah, Alex Wenzel, I saw you unmute. Yeah, do you want to share?
Yeah, I think everyone has kind of made the point that the best way to kind of, I think if you had to choose one thing to boost your sort of competitiveness, it would be some kind of research experience, whether that's something you do after you graduate or something you try to do while you're still in undergrad. I'll address Zichen's comment as well in the chat, that I think is, at least as far as email is concerned, I think you can reach out to professors all over the place. Just introduce yourself, what school you're at and what your major is, and be in like the first couple sentences, just say, I'm the senior bioinformatics major at UCSD, and I'm interested in summer research internships, or I'm interested in something else. That's how my lab actually has gotten, especially over the summer. We always have a lot of undergrads around, and I think this summer at least 2 or 3 of them were from other universities, where the student had just sort of cold emailed my advisor, and she passed the email off to me, and I was like, yeah, I'll interview them and see if I can give them something to work on over the summer. And then especially now that by the next summer things might be really different, but I still think especially in a field like ours, virtual work might kind of stick around, if not as the default, then as at least something that's accepted, where they might, be open to you saying like, hey, I'm going to go back, live with my parents for 3 months rent free and do research with you or something virtually, depending on what you want to do. I'm just saying there's more flexibility now with something like that than I think there used to be. So yeah, definitely reach out to PIs. They won't always respond, not because they think your email was dumb or anything like that, but sometimes they really do just, they don't have room in their lab, or they don't have anything for an undergrad to work on or anything like that. So definitely, if that's what you're interested in, then reach out to any whose work might interest you.
Don't get disheartened about emailing PIs if they don't respond to you. Like Alex said, I think it's really easy to kind of take that stuff personally, but just keep firing them off. Be persistent, and if you email the younger ones, they'll respond. They're more likely to respond.
From a UCSD perspective too, undergraduate program, certain amount to it because of the quality of the education. And people be interested in me as a candidate back when I was shopping around for advisors, and it helps to give a little summary of yourself and interested into them.
Yeah, I agree. It is good to be sort of to the point and direct, what you're asking for. And also don't be surprised if you get like one-word emails in response, like, thanks, I forwarded this to my, to someone else. My PI tends to be pretty like sparse in your email replies. And she also gets definitely hundreds of emails a day. So the more sort of to the point you can be, while still being formal is good.
Also the last thing that I'll add is that like check the number of postdocs, check the like ratio to like postdocs to grad students in the lab. If it's only postdocs, then it's just like there's some PIs that just want a lot of research to be done with not a lot of oversight. And those are the ones who have a lot more postdocs in the lab typically. So that's like another thing when like shopping around, if you're looking for an internship, or even if you're applying to grad school, like I would personally not want to work in a lab with all postdocs, because that indicates the mentorship style is more like you should be at the level of a postdoc. But yeah, that's just another thing that I thought of.
I mean, in that scenario, you probably be mentored by a postdoc, not by the PI themselves. Which I was part of some of those labs as an undergrad and postgraduate, and yeah, I had like kind of like Joe alluded to, I had very little face time with the PI, but the postdocs were all amazing, and a couple of them took me under their wings, and I was able to learn a ton from them. So it's definitely a different environment. So it's something to consider.
Oh, yeah, a lot of great advice there. Yeah, I guess like you guys mentioned, that it's obviously very hard to do research, and you have to kind of be committed when going into PhD. So as a current grad student, what has been your greatest challenge in your work for your PhD? Yeah, if anyone wants to start, like Joe.
Yeah, I was thinking, I mean, like, I feel like, I don't know, I guess like the cop-out answer would be to say that like, I know that like research is the only thing I want to do. And like, I know that if you just keep going, it's like I like research a lot, and I feel like the first 3 years were really fun. And like going into the fourth year, I'm kind of like, wow, there's a lot of projects, and like, man, we're like trying to publish really soon, and like there's just all these things that are stacking up, and then it's like, oh, you have to TA too, that's wonderful, like, but your PI is like, no, you still have to do the same amount of work. So I think like the greatest challenge I've faced recently has been like just like accepting that your plate is only so large and you have a lot of stuff and you can take care of a certain amount of things during the day, but like don't stress out that you feel like you haven't accomplished enough during the day. It's just like you do as much as you can, and then, you know, at 5 o'clock, at least I do this, I just punch out at 5 and I call it a day, start back the next morning, and just repeat that until the stressful time is over. So that's, I guess, what my greatest challenge was so far.
Yeah, I think time management is really key, because whether through it's a combination of things you take on yourself or responsibilities from your lab, or you know, other things that go on, I really always find myself in a state of not being able to do all the things that I would like to be able to do, or need to be able to do. So prioritization and organization is really important. And I think I've learned a lot of good strategies for that in the last few years. But also, yeah, that's just that, yeah. Organization is important.
I would obviously like to echo the idea of time management and prioritization. There's much less structure in a PhD than there is in undergrads. So, you know, I think when you're undergrad, you kind of, those decisions are kind of made for you a lot of the time. Although, of course, you know, you still have to use time management in undergrad. I'm not saying that you don't, but there's less structure in a PhD, and you have to advocate for yourself a lot as well. People aren't looking out for you as much as they are during your undergrad. You know, a lot of our, for example, our graduate program is very involved in, you know, advocating for, you know, inflation adjusted pay raises and students' rights and all these things that, you know, sometimes feels like a burden that we shouldn't have to do, but that's just the reality of it, and it's really important that we do it so that, you know, the group of us can be happy and healthy in our graduate careers. But anyway, a challenge that I've had is just the amount of writing that we have to do in PhD. There's a lot of writing that, you know, I didn't really see very much of when I was a technician, when I was just pipetting and coding all day, you know, happy times. Nowadays, it's a lot of doing that still, but, you know, plus you have to write a ton about, you know, your research, and whether that's in grants or if you're reviewing papers or you're applying to conferences, a lot of writing. And it's definitely a skill that's fun. It's fun and it's painful sometimes, but yeah, I have a lot of relationship with it. I'll say that much.
I think on the flip side to Mike's, I would say my biggest challenge is the reading. It's really hard to know when to put down Google Scholar and to just ask somebody about anything. And I'm always spending way too much time putting references together. That was the hardest part, to manage the time I put into that. Learning to read is a great skill, something that much bad, but there are seminars that you can sign up for that have curated reading lists that I think are really great.
Yeah, for me, I guess, echoing what everyone said, it's time management, and also once you finish the classes and stuff, you're very like free. And I guess for me, I really hated presenting, like so much so that I would hate presenting in lab meeting when I first joined. And that was really stressful. And so trying to do things to improve yourself academically, and then also not being too worried by all the things that you should be doing. Like, I should be reading more papers. Well, actually, I should be reading more papers, but it's also like you can't do everything. I have like 10 projects, and like I don't know if this is good advice or not. But it's like I look at my calendar and I'm like, what's the next meeting that I have to get, this project done for? And also saying no. I feel like that's the biggest thing. Say no to things, and pick a PI that you can say, there's too many things on my plate. I can't do this. That would be the biggest thing, actually. You don't have to do everything, and you shouldn't have to do everything. So I guess I think that covers things.
I think that's a really good point. As graduate students, we're just like flooded with opportunities and seminars and classes and projects, and it's all really exciting. As a scientist, you're who's curious, excited about science, you want to do it all. And then of course, not to mention like outreach opportunities, and like reading papers. But it's really important to make sure to put these things in little boxes and give each box enough to keep it alive.
Ooh, one other thing also. Don't compare your progress to other grad students, because you only see usually final shiny projects and you're just like, wow, I don't have that. What am I even doing? But don't compare yourself. Take each day one step at a time, and celebrate every little milestone you can. You submitted a paper, celebrate. Who cares if it's, not even in review yet? And once you get in review, that's a big thing too, because I can't even tell you how many times my paper has got rejected without review. And then you just move on. It's please celebrate.
Yeah, are we about to start asking more questions now? Okay. Right now I'm writing a couple of my letters of rec for my PIs to submit for me. So like, what really separates like a good letter rec from like a really, really like great letter?
So these are my experience where I didn't do this when I was an undergrad. But for conferences and things, I've drafted letters of rec from my PI before about myself. And usually that's at least just to kind of, in my experience, kind of get them like a good baseline. And they will, edit it and add things and put in what they think, would, really, having been the person who mentored you, make things really good. So try to put, you're starting with a draft, and I think it should be, mostly focused on like facts and things like that. But that's just my personal experience, and the PIs might be different. But at the same time, I think it would be good to emphasize anything you've done that really shows kind of a skill developed for being able to do independent research. Because that's what sort of one of the big things that grad schools are looking for. And because there's actually more and more research now that things like GRE or like grades in undergrad aren't actually deterministic of grad school success. And so they're looking at like, well, how do we know someone is, really committed to becoming this strong, independent thinking scientist who's able to come up with projects and like drive them through to completion and things like that. So if you can tell a story or mention, some things that you've been working on, that would probably be good. Yeah, that's just usually when I write letters of recommendation for undergrads, because I ghostwrite those usually as well. because I work one-on-one with them more often than my PI does. But yeah, that's usually what I try to focus on, is I try to say, like, so-and-so came into my lab, and, as they progressed along, they started, learning how to ask questions, and they would tell me what the next steps were going to be. And they would, put together all these great, figures to present and explain their work. And I didn't have to tell them how to make the figure. And, so that's showing, some degree of gaining skills of being independent.
Sorry. Oh, I was just gonna say, I had to do something similar, Calvin. I had to write a letter rec for myself, or I was told to, about my PI, and I really was scared about it. Didn't really know what to do. Had never done anything like that before, and I ended up asking the postdoc I was working with to write it for me and to ghostwrite it, kind of like Alex has ghostwritten for undergrads he's worked with. So if you're really scared about, if the PI really is going to just like snort whatever you give them, I would encourage you to reach out to other lab members and maybe try to get input from them. I'm sure, or I would presume that you've worked with other members of the lab that can comment on, your skills and your growth.
Yeah, I would also say that, like, writing a really good letter of rec is an art, and it's something that, like, you get when you write lots of letters of rec and what the admissions faculty are going to be looking for. So I think, like, yeah, getting a postdoc to write it if you have one, but also, like, if you don't have that resource, I'm sure there are articles on Google about this, like, just looking these things up, and hopefully it's from, like, a reputable person. But, like, that will also give you a starting point to make sure you're including, like, the important things.
Okay. Can I ask another one? Yeah, so in regards to my personal statement, right now, I talk about, like, the research I want to do and the research I have done and how that relates a lot, but I feel like it struggles to have a lot of personality. Is that, like, okay? Or should I start, like, or should I, like, add more about, like, myself personally? Or should it just, like, stay as it is now, where it's more research orientated?
So there's just one statement. There's not a separate, like, personal statement. It's just one.
Yeah, it's just one statement of purpose.
Oh, okay. I guess I would include a little bit of personal history. Maybe it doesn't have to be, like, throughout the whole document, but a little bit about, like, why you want to do a PhD. Some people, I've read a lot of personal statements. Some people have, motivation from their family. This is why I want to research this particular disease. But also it could just be throughout your research experience. This is why you want to do it. I think the point of a personal statement is to show the committee or whatever that you know what you're getting into, you have the foundation to do it, and you have the critical thinking to know what you don't know and to be able to learn it on your own, kind of. So it's kind of like whatever, but if you can maybe talk about, know what you're talking about. So the project that you did, what was your role in it? What was the larger picture that you were trying to solve? Was there a particular problem that you ran into that you independently figured out how to get through? I think this is all, like, that's the essence of grad school. What's the big question? How does that, like, relate to everything? What's the small question that your project answers? And obviously it's not going to be a smooth road. So can you, when that happens in grad school, can you figure it out? So if you can capture all of that, I think that would be a really good statement.
I think the easy part of writing a statement, I mean, I just did a personal statement for an culture application, and I was thinking about a lot of these things. And I had the same trouble as that you're having. I think it's very easy to state the things you did, the things you want to do, just explicitly and plainly. The hard part is really weaving in like your thinking along the way and crafting like an arc of what, it's always not the most honest maybe to say, oh, all of these individual experiences, like where the puzzle pieces that fit in the right way to make me end up here. That's not always the case, but sometimes you write it like that and it sounds really good. So you can talk about like, what you learned at each stage and how that, pushed your thinking in a certain direction, and, how that, augmented or changed your interests. I think that can add a personal touch to it that, if worded correctly, can hit the mark.
Okay, thank you.
I would also add that, like, especially if you're applying out of undergrad, which it sounds like you might be, like, you really want to make sure you are saying why you want a PhD. I think like a common thing is for students to just be like, oh, the PhD is a path, and they're like, I want to do I want to do a PhD. But I think like you really need to think before you start writing, like, what are your long-term career goals, and why are you choosing a PhD? Like, why don't you just go start doing research? Like, why do you want a PhD as opposed to just going and doing research as a lab tech or like in industry or something like that? Like, I think that's another personal aspect that can be included, and that's important. And then also, like, why bioinformatics?
Okay, thank you.
Great, yeah. More on to like general advice. What are you guys' thoughts on job prospects, academia versus industry after PhD? Specifically, if you're talking industry like software engineering, ML, data science positions.
Well, all I can really say is what I've heard anecdotally from other graduate students who have finished and moved on, because I haven't really begun the job search in that much earnestness myself yet. But the sort of general rule of thumb is that depending on what your career goals are, there are certain paths that are going to be more challenging than others. For example, it is, in this point in time, it is very difficult to sort of get on the path to become a tenured track professor, for example. That is, something that you're probably going to have to do more than one sort of postdoc to sort of get to that point. You have to, publish in specific high impact ways to sort of get yourself on the map for a job like that. And I don't say that to discourage anyone. And if that's what your goal is, I encourage you to pursue that wholeheartedly. But I just want to make sure that it's it's something that is the window sort of number of candidates for the number of people who actually want the kind of job is getting, the ratio there is getting smaller. I think it's more, at least, and different programs might be different. I think UCSD graduates are generally more represented in industry jobs. I think it's because, for one thing, we do have such strong connections locally, like Illumina and the whole kind of biotech startup scene, where a lot of those companies are actually run by UCSD grads. So there's a lot of, certainly while you're in a place like San Diego, there's a lot of networking opportunities where you can kind of try to find a position there. I know some of the other graduates call, Mike, I know has more industry experience than I do, having been there first, so they can probably speak more to that kind of aspect of things.
Well, I actually have no industry experience.
Oh, I thought that's what I thought you said. You did 4 years of industry work first before your PhD.
Oh no, I was a lab tech for 4 years in academic lab.
Oh, okay.
But
sorry to put you on the spot.
No. Yeah, I think this is kind of the question that a lot of PhD students are asked, is like, what are you going to do after? And regarding salary, I think staying in academia is the lower paying option. But I think as a bioinformatician, you're very competitive as a postdoc applicant. So, you might have, your pick of the litter when it comes to labs that you want to do a postdoc in as someone with a bioinformatics degree, in contrast to folks with, a biology or cellular biology degree, now referring to a PhD. But also, like, you have a ton of different prospects with regards to industry, or that's what I'm told, and I hope. Like, that includes tech companies and biotech companies and pharma companies. And like the work, I think the actual work environment, people always discuss, which one should you do, but I think the work environment is very different between the two. There's a lot more structure in the company, typically, from what I've been told, unless you're at a startup. And things are I've been told things are much more team oriented, and there are like really clear goals and like milestones you want to hit in the company, from what I've been told. Whereas in academia, it's much more free and open, which, I think there are pros and cons to both of those things.
Yes, just to add one more perspective to the post-PhD. So I came in wanting to do industry and then changed my mind. So I recently applied to postdoc positions. Well, just one actually. I reached out to who I wanted to work with, and we wrote a postdoc fellowship together, which is one way to avoid the kind of dismal financial future as a postdoc. So there's like options to do that if you want to do postdoc. And I'm mostly doing it, honestly, to live abroad and to see the world a little bit. But it was very easy to get to talk to a PI that I was interested in, because I feel like once you do the PhD, your research is so specific that everyone kind of knows each other or has heard of. And it's actually really hard to get good postdoc applicants. At least that's what I was told. So if you actually want to do bioinformatics postdoc, I think the door is quite open for that, especially if you go to UCSD. I think people are pretty aware of UCSD and other kind of good bioinformatics programs. Some other things to consider are, if you want to be a professor, it's kind of hard to go into industry and then come back. Whereas if you wanted to go to industry at any point, you can do it. Like, if we all wanted to drop out of the PhD, we could probably get industry jobs, whether in data science or some kind of computer science if you're more have those skills. So that's just one thing. And you can definitely market yourself as a bioinformatician or as a data scientist. And usually that's helpful through the courses that you take. If you come to UCSD, you can get a master's at the same time, which is what I did. So that was really helpful for building up that skill set. I feel like I had one more thing to say. Oh, in regards to academic versus industry research. So we had someone from our lab that's now in industry, and she said one of the biggest changes was the ownership of the project. So when you're a PhD student, you're used to owning your project. You do the work, maybe someone else helps you a little bit, but it's largely your own. You publish it, your name is at the front. But in industry, it's very teamwork based, I think, like Mike said. Your name is not necessarily going to be on it. The company owns it, but it is easier to get money instead of writing a grant, you just write a proposal, send it to your manager, they send it to the financial department says, okay, here's the money. So there's pros and cons either way. And I think maybe the work-life balance is a little bit better in industry, but you can force work-life balance, I feel like.
I should say there are also some academic institutions that are pretty well funded and can offer a little bit more competitive, slightly more competitive postdoc salaries, and might have internal funds to help bankroll some projects that might not be funded in like traditional academic settings. And these types of places are kind of popping out more and more. One that comes to mind is like the Chan Zuckerberg BioHub up in San Francisco. It's like a nonprofit that is affiliated with UCSF and has some UCSF faculty at it, and like postdocs work there, and have a lot of money from Zuckerberg and Chan foundations. So it's an interesting type of like path that I think is not like the traditional standard, but it's close to it, but it's a little different. But that's kind of a small note I wanted to make.
Sorry, one last thing that I remembered. Oh, Joe.
I was just gonna say, Zichan, that yes, you should do an internship at a biotech company. I think like, honestly, when it comes to like undergrad research experience, an internship is largely an internship. Like, I don't know, maybe that's like, maybe people would disagree, but like if you're doing an internship in bioinformatics and it's at like Genentech or like some biotech company, like they're gonna be like, oh, that's cool. Like, and you still have to say like, what was the outcome of it? You know, what was the product? Is it still being used today? Like you still want to emphasize what you did, but I think it's also a great experience so you can see what industry is like, because you'll have a taste and you'll be able to ask people questions like what you're asking us tonight, and you'll be able to get a sense from them, like bioinformatic PhDs who are in industry. You can ask them how hard it was to find a job and like why they didn't choose to do a postdoc, or if they did. But yeah, like as Mike said, you can do a postdoc in industry, and that can be a good way to like, if you want to go into industry, that's a good way to like fast track to like more director level positions. But usually if people go into postdocs in academia, that's because they want to be a professor, I would say. It's not, from what I've heard from students in PhDs in industry, like the amount of time you spend in a postdoc, like someone who's a PhD who's worked like 4 years in industry versus a postdoc who took 4 years during that postdoc, like they're going to be at a roughly equivalent like entry points if they're applying for the same job.
Yeah, I think there's like a Nature article or something, like Nature Biotech article that says it's not worth it for PhDs to do a postdoc in academia anymore. Like from a financial perspective, it's just like they wouldn't recommend it. So that's something to consider. But there are definitely other jobs that you can get after a PhD that I wasn't aware of. So you could do consulting, which I wasn't aware of, where you can work for someone like McKinsey, where you do consulting on projects where you just provide advice, like PhD level advice, and they try to recruit like MDs and maybe JDs too, but it's just something that I never would have expected. And I've heard it's kind of like grad school where you get an interesting problem, and you don't really have to stick with it for too long. But there are other positions that you could do besides professor or research scientist for sure.
Cool. Yeah. I guess if that's all for that, we'll have one final question since it's kind of approaching 5:30. As grad students, what would be like one piece of advice you would give to yourself as an undergrad, like as a freshman or at some point, if there's one piece of advice you could give? if anyone wants to start, Joe, if you have any ideas.
Sure. It seems like I have a go first. I mean, I don't know. I feel like one thing that I feel like that I've done kind of like without a time machine to give myself advice has just been like, just like relax and don't worry about it. You're not just like your whole life isn't like a fast track to when you have a really great job. Like you should enjoy your time in your undergrad. Like you should spend time doing other things outside of research, no matter if you're an undergrad or like a PhD graduate student or a research tech. Like you should be enjoying your life at every stage of the way. So just like take some time to yourself for sure. And that's why I like the idea of doing like a gap year or two where you work in a lab as a research tech. It gives you some time to like think and also like, I don't know, go hang out with people and go try new things that aren't science related. Because I think that's an important part. And that will also give you like some perspective on whether or not you want to do the PhD.
I think that's a really good point. Like, I think, growing up, you're always taught about, it's always like pressure about the next step. You're always stressing about the next step. And it's important to like prepare for the next step, of course, but it doesn't mean you can't enjoy the now and like have a good time. I think one piece of advice I would give myself is to not be shy and to speak up more. Yeah, I really shied away from like asking questions at talks or even asking questions to like other older people in my lab if I was nervous that maybe my question was stupid or I didn't know the answer to it, or any other number of reasons why I think the question is a big question. I think asking more questions and being friendly in science it goes such a long way. I think we learn so much from classes and from reading, but we also learn a ton from each other. And you can do that just by being, a friendly and talkative scientist to your peers. So I guess that's my advice: is speak up, don't be shy.
I would say find yourself a good mentor, just an older student, somebody who has been at that school a little more, knows where to find. It's a great place to find that. And the grad students here too probably have a lot of personal insights that they can't share in the short time we have.
I guess to echo what some other people were saying, it's a marathon. Try to enjoy it. Don't have to focus on research all the time. Do what you love to do outside of research. And I guess for me, I was really hung up on the whole like it's a long time thing. I want to go through it quickly. I want to go make money, and it's just like I have now seen that that's not the most important thing. So enjoy it, because it is, I don't know. You have a lot of growth during this period. I had like a moment where I was just like, oh my God, I don't know anything. Or like, oh my God, there's so many things I don't know. And that's fine. Just do your best. It'll be okay. Everything works out. So. Oh, and to reply to Cardiff, that article does describe that, but it's actually not the article I was thinking of, which just goes to show you there's a lot of articles on this topic.
Yeah, Alex Wenzel, do you have like anything to add on the device question?
No, everyone has already said the most important things. I guess when you're looking at schools, also look at the area as well. UCSD is not the only school that is intentionally crowding out all local housing to the detriment of its communities. So, think about cost of living, think about stipend, do some research on that as well. Because that's one thing I think that's a little bit overlooked sometimes. It's a place where you actually want to live. If you're from someone who is somewhere that doesn't have winter, do you want to deal with 9 months of like 30-degree weather in like Chicago or somewhere? That's a big thing as well. And yeah, I would say also spend time looking through like the actual list of faculty at the program. I think I can't remember who else mentioned it, but that they hadn't looked at like the faculty until like their interviews, and they were like, oh, I don't actually want to go here. So I guess that's another really good advice, is it has places where you actually would want to do research. Don't just go off of the name of the school alone. Yeah, that is my advice.
Great, okay, I think we might be done then. Yeah, I don't want to hold you guys for much longer. Yeah, I'll stop recording.